Welcome to College Bound Success, College to Career, the podcast for college curious and college bound students and families. Together, we'll navigate the journey from high school to higher education and beyond. I'm Mark Mostalski, an independent college success consultant, and I'm here to share strategies, insights, and stories to help you make confident choices about college, careers, and your future. So let's get started. So today I'm super excited to welcome Jaime Smith. Jaime is a college advisor and a certified educational planner with 25 years of experience. She specializes in transfer admissions and homeschoolers, neurodiverse learners, and other non-traditional students. She lives in beautiful Eugene, Oregon, so I'm a little jealous about that. Go Ducks, right?
Yeah.
And we'll talk more about this today, but you can also learn more about Jaime through her website, which is transfersavvy.com. And we'll make sure that that gets in the show notes. So, with that being said, I want to share a warm welcome to Jaime. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Fun to have this conversation.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely excited for it and looking forward to the things that you have to say. Today we're really going to focus on transfer side of things, and I know just real quick, let me give a plug. You are an author,
Yay.
and here
Yes.
it is, the complete guide to college transfer, and I will tell you, I went through the entire book, and for those of you wondering, it's just a shade under 300 pages, and I
Yes.
found it to be really robust. You
Thank you.
have examples and case studies. You give a lot of tips and ideas in here that I would say is not just like for the transfer student, but kind of for like anybody at any stage. But certainly you do a lot of great work focusing on the transfer concept.
Thank
So
you.
first, I just wanted to highlight that. I think
Yeah.
it's a great piece that you've done.
Funny that you should mention the length. My original proposal to the publisher was for a somewhat shorter book, and then when I submitted the manuscript, it was quite a bit longer, and they were very kind and ran with it. They decided that it was useful information, so they kept it all.
Yeah, yeah,
We had to
absolutely.
change the size of the book to make it all fit, but that's
You
okay.
did. Okay. Okay. Well, Jaime, with that, we've already jumped in a little bit to your book and everything, but let's back it out a little bit. Can you tell the listeners who are you and what do you do? I mentioned you're a certified educational planner, but yeah, what does that mean?
Yeah. Well, that's my most recent hat that I wear. I do tend to wear a lot of professional hats. I've been kind of all over the place within education. I started out as a fifth and sixth grade English teacher. That was my first job out of college, and I was with that for a while, and then I taught college English for a while, and then I was working with international students and
Mm.
got invested in their success. I was in a program where they were prepping their English to be college ready, and so I started kind of getting into that college application process. But some of it really came through with my daughter. I ended up homeschooling my daughter, so that's how I got into this whole homeschool thing. And
Hmm.
then when it was time for her to go to college, we thought community college was the way to go, and it was a very common path for homeschoolers too, to just basically make community college your high school.
Right.
And it was such a great path for her, but it was also really complicated. And I think part of her success is because I knew where to look. I knew where to find the
Hmm.
information. I knew the questions to ask. And I realized not everybody has that behind them. So here I am 10 years later. She's, graduated. She got a master's degree. She's getting married this weekend. She's a full-on
Wow,
adult now.
congrats.
Yeah, thank you. um, but here I am 10 years later, still like obsessing about that experience and wanting to make it more possible for other students who don't have, a certified educational planner at home checking things out for them. So I'm just trying to get all that information into people's hands, really.
Right, right. So you mentioned that you started out as a fifth and sixth grade teacher. Let's even go back a little bit more. Like what was your educational pathway? What was it like for you?
Yeah. So I come from a really blue collar family. I'm the first in my family to go to college. And, I just went to the public schools that I was slated to go to. I went where the school bus took me.
Mhm.
And I basically got lucky in finding my path to college. That was not something anybody in my family did. There was no expectation or
Right.
lessons on how to do that. But I got lucky because I had a counselor in high school who believed in me, and I had a friend who was 1 year older who was willing to just tell me what to do. Basically, I just did
Mhm.
everything he did, literally. And I applied to one college, and it was
Okay.
UC Berkeley, and I got in.
Hmm. Wow.
Nobody told me that, like, you're supposed to have, a reach and a safety and I'm going to Berkeley. That's where my friend went.
Hmm.
So, that worked out. And I ended up studying linguistics there. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I think I applied as a sociology major and said I was going to be
Okay.
like pre-law or something, because kids do that, right? Like, what are the
Right.
what are the jobs? I'm going to be a doctor or a lawyer. Like, those are the only two jobs we knew back then before the internet. Um,
Mhm.
and so I went, and then it was fine. Sociology is interesting, but then that friend who literally told me what to do in every step of the way, he was exploring all kinds of things, and he took this linguistics class, and I watched him doing
Mhm.
homework one day, and I was like, I want to do your homework. And that's how I fell into linguistics. And I ended up getting a master's in TESOL, teaching English to speakers of other
Uh-huh.
languages. That's how I ended up working with international students at the
International students,
college
right?
level. I did a study abroad while I was in college in Japan, and I, studied there, but also taught English there because, rules were lax at the time,
Hmm.
visa, whatever. Um, you know, we just did stuff. I don't know. It was the 90s. So yeah, so that's kind of how I just fell into all of this. And I think this also it informs my work as well. When kids are worried about what major to do, I'm like, don't worry about it. I was a linguistics major. You can do anything. And I love underdogs in education, right? The international students, the homeschoolers, the neurodivergent, the transfers, the first gen. I love working with those populations. That's my favorite. And since so much of my success really came down to luck and being in the right place at the right time with some people to guide me, I just have a really strong belief that your educational success should not depend on luck.
Mm.
So if I can make it more informed and less luck based, that's my goal.
Yeah. That right there, that might be the tagline I use for this podcast right there.
Right?
That don't luck should not be your strategy, right?
Yep.
It's
Yep.
we all should look forward to having luck in our lives, but let's
Yes.
not think of it
Shouldn't
as the
be the only
strategy.
reason you managed to get a degree.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Oh, that's awesome. So when you think back, can you talk about maybe a hiccup that you encountered? And the reason I bring this up is because I think sometimes, I've worked with transfer students, and sometimes there's this sense that I've experienced where a student feels like, oh, I messed up, right? Because the first school, or maybe even the third school, right,
Hmm.
that I chose just isn't the one. And so rather than thinking about like moving into a forward progression, they kind of sometimes feel like this is what I'm running away from. They view it through
Yeah.
more of a negative lens. So I guess, yeah, can you share a hiccup that you encountered and how you worked through that?
Yeah. So actually, it was kind of interesting. That year I spent in Japan, that study abroad program was not a university sponsored program. It was a separate
Oh,
program
okay.
run by the Japanese government. It actually required me to withdraw from Berkeley for a year to go do
Oh,
this program and
okay.
then come back and re enroll. And I thought, naive me at the time, no problem.
No problem. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Turns out it was a little bit of a problem. It was not quite as easy as I thought that was going to be. And there was some paperwork involved. And in the meantime, they managed to reclassify me as a non-California resident. I was suddenly an out-of-state resident with
Oh, yeah.
credits that may or may not apply. And yeah,
Mhm.
there was a whole amount of paperwork and phone calls and standing in people's offices to be like, no, I've literally never lived anywhere else in my life except this 1 year in Japan. And I did not become a Japanese resident, I assure you. So, yeah, I mean, now that you mentioned that, is that part of my thing and part of why I go in this direction? Maybe it is. Maybe subconsciously, I was always thinking, it was really hard to like re-enroll and get everything lined up, and
Mhm.
I had to fight the bureaucracy to make it work. Yeah, maybe that's my theme. I'm fighting the
Right.
bureaucracy right and left.
There you go. There you go. That's your business card.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, well, that's a great example. And I will say just a commonality. My sister actually, she was part of the Rotary International Youth Exchange program her
Yeah,
senior year of high school, and she went
cool.
to Japan. So she spent a full year in
Nice.
Japan, and it forever changed her life.
Yes.
She actually went on to get degrees. Her bachelor's and her master's is in Japanese language, and it
Nice.
just forever changed her life. So,
Yeah.
well,
I'm
thanks for
such a
sharing that.
fan of
That's
study abroad programs of
uh,
any flavor. It is a game
yeah.
changer. It's
It's one of my
a whole new
regrets.
perspective.
Yeah, it's one of my regrets that I did not do that. So, well, let's talk about kind of your book, The Complete Guide to College Transfer, and specifically that topic of a transfer student. Um, let's let's just start by how would you define a transfer student? And maybe let's think about, not just who is, but who isn't a
Yeah.
transfer student.
The definition is more complicated than you'd think.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, a transfer student is a student who has earned college credits since graduating from high school. Um, that definition can vary. In fact, every
Mm,
university kind of gets to define its own version of transfer student. So there will be some universities that say you're only a transfer student if you've earned 12 credits, say, since
mm,
graduating from high school. There are some
okay.
universities that will say if you have enrolled in a college, whether you earned credits or not, if you have been enrolled as a degree seeking student, you are now a transfer student. So it really depends. And then there are like kind of what we would call stealth transfer students, which are those high school students who earned a ton of dual enrollment credits, maybe even got an associate degree. And they'll
Hmm.
apply as first years, but they still face all the same challenges of credit transfer and figuring out their advanced standing and all of those things. And they end up in kind of a limbo situation where they're neither first year nor transfer, and they're kind of in between. So it's a strangely complicated term.
Hmm. Yeah. And so today, I mean, we're seeing a proliferation of students, high school students, that are basically college students because they're taking credits through, it could be through a community college, it could be through a 4 year. Um, so if if I'm a student like that, and let's say I've taken 9 credits through a my local community college, then when it comes time for me to apply, am I applying as a transfer student?
No, you would be
No.
applying as a first year student. You may
Okay.
have transferable credits, and you
Yep.
absolutely need to disclose that you've been enrolled in a college and you have college credits. Or even if you've enrolled and you didn't get the credits and maybe you withdrew from the class or even failed out of the class, you still have to report those credits. But you will still be applying as a first year student. Now, once you land on campus, you might get like
Mhm.
reclassified or something.
Right.
I've definitely 9 units probably wouldn't do it, but let's say you've got 30 units. They may then reclassify you as a sophomore, but that's not going to change. You're still living in first year housing. You're still considered a freshman for, all of those like participation purposes, housing, things like
Mhm.
that. But you might get advanced, like earlier registration for classes because you have advanced standing or something. So,
Right.
but that all
I do.
happens once you're there. You're still
Once you're there.
applying as a first year.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So So and this is getting a little bit into the details, but if I'm that student, when I apply, let's say I'm using the Common App, uh, I have my high school record, and my high school record might show that I took these courses through state college, right?
Yeah.
But I also have a transcript through state college, correct? So I
Yeah.
need to remember not just my high school report, my transcript, but I technically have a college transcript and I need to remember to submit that, right?
Yes, yeah, you do. And I've actually heard recently with the proliferation of dual enrollment, there are some universities now that are doing checks on first year students, running them through National Student Clearinghouse to see if there are
Mm.
any unreported college records among their first years, because you are obligated to report all schools and
All
colleges attended.
right, right. And I think the key word there, at least that I've seen with some folks I've worked with, is attended.
Yes,
It does not mean you even completed the
right.
course. So even
Exactly.
if you enrolled and dropped the course, you still have that
Yeah.
transcript.
I actually just went through this with an actual transfer student who had attended one university and then enrolled in another, but withdrew from the classes in like the first week. And she was
Right,
absolutely certain that there was going to be no record of her credits and that she didn't need to send a transcript or anything. I was like, we got to find out. We got to,
yeah,
go through the process of ordering a transcript to see what's out there, because you don't want to blindly send in this application and, even report that you attended, but not know if there's anything on that record. We got to find out what's on there. So we order it. And
right,
sure enough, she's shocked. There were 3 classes with W's on there that she thought were just going to disappear, and they were
yeah,
there. So,
they were
there
there.
was stuff to report. It didn't harm her application, but if she hadn't reported it, it could have
Hmm.
harmed her application.
Yep, yep, yeah, that's true, absolutely.
It's that
So your
honesty,
book,
disclosure.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's you should always disclose. Yeah, it's better to do that. So your book is titled, The Complete Guide to College Transfer, and um, here we are in 2026. People have been going to college for a long time. People have been transfer students for a long time. So why does this topic deserve, a dedicated book?
Yeah, well, as you can see, there were 300 pages of content that needed to get out there.
That's right.
Yeah. And there really isn't a resource that walks you through all the steps the way mine does. There are tons of books about first year applications and how to do it and what to look for and how to find a school. And there's really nothing for transfer students. And there's also this sort of stigma, I think. People don't talk about transfer. They don't identify themselves as transfer students, especially if they've gone to community college. There's all this, mythology around community college students and this stigma that, like, oh, that was, your backup plan. It's because you didn't get in anywhere. No, that's really not what community college is about. Um, so I think a lot of people just don't talk about it, and they just
Mhm.
apply and they get whatever credits they get, and then they don't complain and they don't discuss. And I just thought all of it needed to be brought to light, because
Mhm.
about a third of all undergraduate students transfer at least once before they get a degree. That's not an insignificant part of the college going population.
No.
But
Yeah.
everybody's
It's
shocked by that.
hundreds of thousands. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands.
Everybody's shocked and thinks, oh my gosh, I had no idea there was so many. It's because nobody talks about it. You get to college and you just assume everybody else is a first year. And if you're a transfer, then you're the only one. But no, there
Right.
are surely hundreds, if not thousands, of other transfer students on your campus. So
Mhm.
part of this is, to help the students figure out how to do it and get their credits. And part of this is to shine a light on transfer and make it more visible and say, there are tons of transfer students out there. You're not alone.
Right. Right. Yeah, definitely. And I know, like, I worked at a small school in Colorado, and we ran all of the orientation programs. And you kind of talk about this, like transfer friendly schools. And I think sometimes schools, they put so much energy into their orientations for their first year students and so forth. And sometimes transfer students are an afterthought. But
Yep.
we tried really hard to make sure that those transfer students knew that this was a place where we wanted them to be. They were welcome, and we made sure that the orientation, we didn't just throw them into the first
Yeah.
year students. It's like you're a unique population. We're going to do a unique orientation.
I love
So that
that.
was that
Bravo.
was
I wish
yeah,
all schools did that because it's
yeah,
a different population. They have different needs.
it is. It is. Um, so some people listening to this might be familiar with Jeff Salingo. Jeff is definitely a voice in the higher ed space. He's written a number of books. He hosts podcasts called Future You, but lots of us in higher ed and doing this work definitely know Jeff and the work that he does. So he wrote one of the kind of testimonials for
Yeah.
you in your book, and he says that your book, helps turn a maze into a map. So can
Yeah.
you just walk us through that map in general? Like, what is the structure of the book, and how is it useful?
Yeah. I gotta say, I loved that phrase. Of course, he's a professional writer. When that endorsement came back and he's like, it turns a maze into a map. I'm like, yes, of
Yeah.
course, that's how I want to advertise this book. That's what I do.
Yes.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, but if there's no information out there, students are just launching into this maze, this labyrinth. They're just trying to find their way, and I try to walk them through the steps from beginning to end, from thinking about, do I even want to transfer, if you're at a 4-year, or do I want to go to community college and tackle this transfer pathway, to going through the application, to finding the schools that are actually going to be receptive to you as a transfer student. And it
Mm.
doesn't end there. It doesn't end with applying and getting in. Then it's transfer credit evaluations, which a lot of students just didn't even think about. They assume if they
Right.
attended an accredited college, they're just going to get credit for their courses. And it's not
Right.
that simple. It's actually very complicated, the process that schools go through to evaluate credits and decide if they transfer as gen eds, as major prerequisites, as electives, what number of credits. And gosh, if you're then trying to move between quarter and semester schools, now you're doing math calculations in there. I mean, it's really pretty chaotic. And most students are totally surprised when they get that level of to that point in the process. They're totally shocked to get this nonsensical credit evaluation and don't know how to interpret it. So I spend a lot of time going through, how do you evaluate this? And then how do you advocate for yourself if you think it should be different? Because ultimately the student knows what they did. The student
Right.
knows what they're applying to and what they're bringing to the table. So the student is kind of the expert in what should
Hmm.
align. So, I try to show how you can explain, what you should get credit for, how you can prove it. Save your syllabus, everybody. If I could have that on a flashing neon sign, everybody save your syllabus.
I'm so glad you said that because, not to interrupt you here, but when I worked at the University of Colorado's College of Nursing, I was working with nurses who wanted to become advanced practice nurses.
Mm-hmm.
And often we had folks that wanted to transfer even graduate level courses. And to your point, without a syllabus,
Yep.
forget it. Forget it. And it needs to be that course
Yes.
specific syllabus. It cannot be
Yep.
one from a year later
Yeah.
because that's not the course you took.
Right.
So yes, save your
Save your
syllabi.
syllabus, everybody.
Yes.
Yeah, I tell all of my students that, the high schoolers too. I'm like, if you're doing dual
Yeah.
enrollment, often the syllabus is the only way you're going to get credit for anything. So everybody out there listening, please save your syllabi, because it is way harder to track them down after the fact than it is to just
Yes.
download that PDF from the LMS while you're enrolled. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I walk them through like the evidence to submit. The syllabus is always number one, but you can also support it with information about the textbook, or
Mhm.
information, if you compare the course catalog description of the course you took with the course catalog description of the course you think it's equivalent to, and you just hand it over on a silver platter. If you make it easy for them, then you're more likely to get those credits. And a lot of students also don't realize that this isn't a final evaluation. This is a negotiation. This is a first attempt. So read it, see if it makes sense. And if it doesn't match your expectations, go back and say, well, actually, I think it should be this. And here's my evidence.
Yeah.
So that's just ends up being a huge part of the transfer process that people don't even realize.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. That credit evaluation. And, to your point, like advocating for yourself,
Yes.
3 credits is 3 credits.
Yep.
That is time, that is money. And,
Yeah.
advocate. Don't just,
Don't
whatever they
just
come back
accept.
with. Yeah. Don't just
Yeah.
accept it. It does make
And
a
you,
difference.
mentioning the money piece too. I mean, if you're looking at your offers and you're just comparing, scholarships or financial aid or which schools sound cooler,
Mhm.
you're missing a piece of the puzzle because you have to compare those credit evaluations to find out how much time you will spend at each campus to earn your degree. And sometimes it's drastically different depending on how the requirements may vary, how they evaluated your credits coming in. Maybe you're transferring and thinking you did 2 years at a community college, you're going to do 2 years at a 4 year. But depending on how your credits are evaluated, maybe you're going to do 3 years. And
Mhm.
a whole extra year of tuition and room and board, that is a significant time and money
Absolutely.
expense. So
Absolutely.
you gotta compare those
Yep.
records.
Yeah. So, in addition to your book, you also have your website, transfersavvy.com, and you have a number of free resources on there. One of the resources, so first of all, I want to highlight one of the nice things you've done. Your worksheets, those resources you have, connect with chapters in your book. So it's really nicely laid out that way. So one of the things that you break down is what you call your 5 Ps: the place, people, programs, pastimes, and practicality. Yes, 5 Ps. So why are those each important, and how should students think about
Yeah. And I do think those are important both for first year and transfer students when evaluating colleges, but
them?
the practicality piece is the one that becomes especially important for transfer students because the practicality is including, can you get in? Have you met the prerequisites? Are they going to accept your transfer credits? But I think all of those are important for everyone when evaluating colleges. And
Yeah.
why did I go with 5 Ps? Because I'm an English teacher at heart and I love alliteration. So
Of
if
course.
I have the opportunity to make a worksheet with alliteration, I'm going to do that. That's probably also why I love Jeff's quote about turning a maze into a map.
Yeah.
Love alliteration. But yeah, I mean, I feel like there are so many factors when you're looking at a college, and so many students will get focused on the brand name or the cool
Mhm.
major. And sure, those can be factors, but don't forget the other things. Don't forget that you want to find your people. You want to find a place that's got a demographic makeup that aligns with your values and your comfort level. You want to find a place that is going to be welcoming, but also in the geographic region where you want to live, or is a
Yeah.
certain distance near to or far from your family, as the case may be. All of these things are important, and even like place and weather. It seems like such a shallow
Mhm.
thing, but you know what? If you're
It matters.
miserable in snow, if you don't want to tramp through the snow to your classes, that's going to affect your success in college. So
Mhm.
really you have to look at all of those things.
Yep. Yeah. I've I've worked with clients in southwestern Colorado where it's pretty much like just sunny, 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 and I've had folks, like go up to the Pacific Northwest, and they're like, "Oh, I had no idea
Yeah.
this is not sunny southwestern Colorado." It's like,
Right.
yeah, no, it's not.
Yeah. And
Yeah. Yeah.
similarly, I'm in the Pacific Northwest and I'm pretty acclimated. I think our weather's pretty nice, the all that rain makes things turn green and I love it.
Hmm.
But if I tell students, hey, you should really look at Arizona, they're like, "Oh, no." Like I looked at the temps down
Yeah.
there. It's like 110 6 months of the year. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, yeah, you got to consider that."
Yeah, I know. I just helped my nephew move from Tucson, Arizona back to Wisconsin, and we were down there, and yeah, it was warm during that move. So
Yeah, it's hot.
yeah.
Not
So
everybody's cut
you
out for that.
no, no. So you talked about how to help students maximize their credits. So what is the process of a credit transfer? Like what does that look like, and what should students be prepared for when they get a review back?
Yeah. Well, my favorite transfer friendly schools are the ones that share information before you even apply. The schools that, if you Google the name of the school and transfer credit database or transfer equivalency guide or something like that, and you can find a guide where you look up your current school, the classes you're taking, and how they align, that's awesome. If you can find out before you even apply how your credits are going to
Right.
work, fantastic. In general, those are historical records, meaning they only have classes in there if someone else has transferred from that school with that course. So, there's limited usefulness, but still, it can give you sort of a starting point for research to know if a school has generally accepted these kinds of credits. Then you apply, and ideally, you get a transfer credit evaluation with your acceptance, or, a day or two later. That's not true everywhere. And that's one of the things that I say, like, you want to evaluate the transfer friendliness of a school by their policies for giving you a credit review. If you are truly going to evaluate your options, you need to be able to compare your credit evaluations from all the schools that admitted you. And there are some
Mm.
schools out there that will not give you a credit evaluation until you enroll.
Until you enroll.
They want you to put down a deposit, commit to the school, decline your other offers, and then they'll give you a credit review.
Wow.
And that's just not, and I know there are schools out there that will explain their reasoning for it, but sorry, from a student perspective, that is not transfer friendly.
Yeah, it's
It
not
just isn't,
transfer.
you know? The students need to know it's a huge part of the decision. Otherwise, it would be like agreeing to attend a school having no idea what the price tag would be, no idea what your tuition would be. We don't expect students to commit for first year applications without a financial aid letter. We should not expect transfers to commit without a transfer credit evaluation. And that's actually in the NACAC Guide to Ethical Practice. NACAC doesn't really get to tell people what to do anymore, but it still has a guide for ethics that
Yeah.
ethical institutions should follow. And it
Right.
says transfer students shouldn't be asked to deposit without a financial aid letter and a transfer credit evaluation in hand. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, there are still a lot of schools out there that don't do that.
Right.
But yeah, then they need to be looking at these credit evaluations to see not just how many credits transferred. Sometimes there's just a number like, yay, you took 30 credits, 30 credits transfer, success. You really want to know how they transferred. Do they
Mm,
fulfill general education requirements?
okay.
Do they apply to your major? Or are they counted as electives? And sometimes this is sneaky. Sometimes they're well labeled, like the following are electives. You have a list of courses that counted as electives. Great. Sometimes it's sneaky and you just get a list of courses and then there will be like an X in the number. So it will be like 100X, psychology
Hmm.
100X. And they're just saying that it's an elective in lower division psychology. It doesn't align with any specific class. And that means if
Right.
you go there, and you thought this was your abnormal psych class or whatever, when you go there, they're saying it's not the same as our abnormal psych. You got to take that class again here. And maybe that's something you need to follow up with and fight for
Mhm.
before you commit. Because if you end up having to redo a bunch of classes, that adds time and frustration. And then there are some that are just flat out electives, like they really don't count for anything. They're just added credits to your degree. And sure, you need 120 semester units to get a degree, but you don't need that many electives. So if most
Right.
of your classes are coming in as electives, you still have a whole degree to finish, So you really just want to ask questions. And there's no standardized transfer credit evaluation. They all look different, and a lot of them are really, really difficult to parse. Ask
Hmm.
questions. You're allowed to ask questions. You're allowed to say, this doesn't make sense to me. I need someone to explain it to me before I enroll. That is totally
Yeah.
valid.
Yeah. So that leads into the next question, which is, so at the end of every chapter in your book, you give like tips, right? Um, and one of the things that I saw, and it makes sense to me, but often your answer was it depends.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a
that's an
joke.
answer, yeah,
It's
to
a
many
joke
of the
among
questions. So
people who
yeah,
specialize in
right?
transfer. Everything's it
Yeah.
depends.
So how would you coach a student who has made that, like, I'm ready, I am transferring, but they're like, they want certainty?
Yeah.
How would you coach them through a process that so often ends with it depends?
Yeah, it really depends on the accepting institution. If you want certainty, you have to get somebody on the phone or in email at the institution you think you might want to apply to and ask them questions, because there are no hard and fast nationwide transfer rules. Everything is defined by the individual accepting university, right down to like when the deposit deadline is. You know, we're so used to this May 1st decision day for first years. Transfers don't
Right.
have that.
No.
Transfers may get, deposit deadlines that say, 7 days after you receive this acceptance to, July 1st. Um, again, when do you have to deposit? It depends. So you have to ask the individual universities. There's just no way around it. I wish it were simpler. I wish there was some standardization. I would love for colleges to get together and decide, you know what, we're going to make the transfer deposit day June 15th. That would be amazing. We're going to
Right.
standardize the credit evaluation report and make them all look the same. I would love that. I don't see that happening in the near future. So for now, it depends, and ask really pointed questions of every university of interest.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Yeah, it would be nice to have some standardization, but
Yeah.
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 Um, so when it comes to uh, the idea of transferring, do you think, like, is there a type of student who would you think benefit the most from transferring rather than staying put? Like, what do you think that decision tree looks like?
Yeah. So obviously, students who are in a 2 year, they have to transfer if they're going to get a bachelor's degree, right? That's a no brainer. To get the degree you want, you have to transfer,
Uh-huh.
which is fun for writing essays, because very often the essay is like, why are you a transfer student? Why do you want to transfer? It's like, well, to get the degree.
Yep. Yep. I'm ready to go to the next
Yeah,
level.
right. But for 4 year to 4 year transfers, I find that the ones who are most successful are the ones who can articulate why they chose their first school and then why it wasn't the right fit.
Hmm.
If they can reflect on their sort of high school senior selves and say, I chose this school because of X, Y, and Z. And now I know that what I really needed was A, B, and C.
Right.
Those are the students that are often the most successful in transfer, because they've learned enough about themselves to know what they want in the next adventure and know how to find what's going to fit. you know I think the students who are sometimes struggle with transfer are the ones who are just like, it just doesn't fit. I can't find my people. I don't like it here. Those are pretty vague ideas of, not being happy where you are. And then you have to wonder, well, is it homesickness? We got to
Hmm.
consider that most first year students go through a semester
Some
or a
some
year
level.
of homesickness. Like, it's a really, really common. And you don't necessarily want to transfer if it's actually just homesickness, because you're going to start over and probably have a whole new round of homesickness. Um, and the students who are just trying to, like, I don't know, they're not unhappy where they are, but they want to level up, kind of, they want more of a brand name. That's a tough one too, because how do you explain like what you're looking for, and how do you know that this bigger name is going to be a good fit for you? How do you know you're going to
Right.
be happy there? So I find
Right.
that the most successful ones know why they chose the first one, know why it didn't fit, and know what they need next to be successful. And sometimes that also includes knowing your major. You can't usually apply as a transfer undecided. You're almost always applying to a specific major. So you have to kind of be able to say, I'm at least pretty sure this is what I want to do at the next school. Sometimes that's the whole
Yeah.
reason for transfer. You figured out what you really want to do, and then it turns out the school you're at doesn't have that major.
Right.
That's one of the best reasons, because it's so clear and it's so researchable. to find the place that's going to have what you want.
Yeah. Yeah. On that, could you, I know you live on, the West Coast, and you're very familiar with California and the competitive nature of the UC system.
Yeah.
And the community college, like it has been, I'm going to say embraced, right,
Yeah.
as a pathway to getting into basically the most competitive public system we have in the country, right? The
Right.
UCs. It has just become part of this is a feasible, logical step.
Yep.
I don't think that's true and embraced everywhere,
It's true.
right? That
Yeah.
and I saw the same thing when I worked at the University of Colorado's College of Nursing. We had an amazing um the so our nursing program you had to transfer into. We did not have a direct entry
Hmm.
program. And we worked with three community colleges around Denver that basically you did your first 60 credits there. And the competition to get into the nursing program was, I'm not going to say it was guaranteed, but it was not like single digits like you see in
Yeah.
other places around the
Yeah.
country. So I guess could you speak to that? Like, what is still is there still stigma, and how do we overcome that idea?
Yeah. I think there is still a stigma to community college. I think it is diminishing, especially among the students, among Gen Z.
Okay.
My daughter, for example, she's totally proud of her community college associate's degree. She puts it on her resume right next to her bachelor's and her master's, and that is part of her
Hmm.
education, and she's proud of it. But I think for a lot of parents, there's a lot of stigma because we grew up with oh, that's like where the losers go, and the older generation doesn't realize everything that has gone into creating those articulation agreements, those transfer
Right.
guarantees, those now for state systems that have really clear articulation agreements, it's so much smoother to take a transfer pathway because you check off the classes, you check off the requirements, and you kind of know based on your GPA what your odds are of getting into the various schools in your state. It's all
Right.
pretty clear cut and data based and not dependent on luck. you know
Hmm.
um and it also usually takes tests out of the equation. Even before COVID, even before everybody was test optional, transfers were rarely asked to put in an SAT or an ACT score. So it really did in those systems that are very well organized. It just came down to taking the classes that were required and getting good grades, which
Hmm.
is great for risk averse students. I mean, that was my daughter's situation. Like, she is not a risk taker at all. She's
Hmm.
like, give me the checklist, tell me what to do so I can make it happen. And that
Right.
was a great fit for her. Not to mention the fact that community colleges have much smaller class sizes in general. Like my husband and I both went to Berkeley. Huge intro classes. My husband would joke about being in a class that had like 1,000 people enrolled, and
Hmm.
at the time, pre-Zoom, distance learning, what they would do, because there weren't any lecture halls big enough, is they would put 500 of you in one lecture hall with the professor, and the overflow was in the other 500 person lecture hall with a video stream. That's nuts.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's
Welcome to
common,
education for the masses. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Whereas in community college, in my daughter's case at least, I don't think she ever had a class with more than 30 students, you
Yeah.
know and it was all much more personalized. She had relationships with her professors, and that's just not available everywhere else. So it can be a good path. But like you said, like in places like California, I think the stigma is diminishing because
Hmm.
it is such a clear path to the UCs and to UCs like Berkeley and UCLA, like very
Right.
achievable pathways to top UCs. In other
Hmm.
parts of the country that don't have those kinds of pathways, maybe it doesn't seem as appealing or seems more like the backup plan, the lesser choice. But I think it's changing everywhere, and states are aware. Lots of states are starting to build this up. I mean, just in the last 10 years since I've really been researching this, I've seen programs arise at, like, Massachusetts has mass transfer, you
Yeah,
know.
transfer.
Um,
Yeah.
Florida is working on common course numbering. So you're not even worried about the transfer credit articulations and lining up courses. They just have the same number,
They
you
have the
know,
same number. Yep. Yep.
like easy peasy. So more states are getting on board with those kinds of things. I'm in Oregon now. Oregon is moving towards common course numbering.
Mhm.
Oregon also has dual partnership programs where you can apply to the 4-year, but say that you want to start taking your classes at the 2-year, and you're dual enrolled in both the community college and the 4-year, and you can take classes for cheap at the community college, but you could actually live in the dorm of the 4-year.
Mhm.
So I think the lines are blurring and the pathways are becoming smoother. I just think
Right.
I think we're getting there, but slowly. But still, the stigma persists, and sometimes students don't want to
Mhm.
say, I'm a community college student or whatever. And
Yeah.
there's a whole history to that if you want my spiel
Yeah.
on why there's a stigma.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. I'm seeing it. I think it's changing, and I think that's for the better for
Yeah,
everybody
for sure.
from an accessibility standpoint, from a cost standpoint. Yeah, for many reasons.
Yeah.
Um, so I brought this up, but nursing around the country is just one of those majors
Yeah.
that it's very common for students to transfer into. It's one of the most competitive and impacted BS degrees in the country. There are hundreds of nursing school programs. Not all of them are direct entry. You have to transfer into them. So,
Right.
what advice do you have for students that are trying? They want to be a nurse. They want to get that bachelor's. And what advice do you have for them to navigate that type of a highly competitive major?
Yeah. That is such a tricky one, because if you're in a program, if you're in like pre-nursing at a school and you have to apply to the actual nursing program for junior year, you've got advisors at that school telling you what you need to do to be admissible at your school. And it's
Mm-hmm.
easy to think, well, that's probably the same everywhere. If I take the requirements for this school, I can probably apply to multiple schools for, backup plans and be okay. Not so much. You
Mm-hmm.
probably know nursing programs for junior year entry. There are a lot of different requirements out there. There are different tests, there are different course requirements, there are different deadlines. Do you have to take it before you apply or just before you would enter?
Right.
Lots of nuance to that. And so when you go to a pre-nursing program and you think, well, I'm just going to transfer to the program on my campus, that's great, unless you've got, like a 10% acceptance
Right.
rate for your on-campus program, in which
Mm-hmm.
case you need backup plans. And so then you need to be looking at the specific requirements at other universities that would accept outside transfer applicants as well, and find out, what is the timeline? If I take this class, if I plan for this to be in spring of my sophomore year, is that going to be good enough to apply for transfer into these other nursing programs? I have a case in the book. You've probably read my nursing case study in the book, right?
Yep.
She was in that position of just wanting backup plans, of thinking, I don't
Right.
know if I'm going to get into the program on my campus. So I want to apply to other nursing programs so I know I can get this degree. And she came to me, in the fall, mid fall of her sophomore year, when it was too late really to make changes to her course schedule. Things were already underway. She already had a plan and she had done everything right, did everything her advisor on that campus said. And we started out researching all these different nursing programs. And at the end of the day, we started with like 12 different schools, and we ended up with 4 that she was actually eligible to apply to as a transfer,
Mm-hmm.
because she either hadn't taken the right test or hadn't taken the right classes, or had a class planned for the next spring, but they needed it done by December. It was really disheartening that, it wasn't even a matter of applying and do I get in or not, and do they accept my credits or not. It was, I'm not even eligible to apply to this school. It was
Mm-hmm.
really, really kind of distressing to see that. So I think if you're looking at those really selective programs, again, it depends. What are the requirements? It depends. You've got to check the requirements for each individual school and find out early on, what do you need to do and by when.
Mhm. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, and again, the deadlines are so important, because some programs, might start numerous cohorts throughout the year. They might have a
Mm-hmm.
spring and a summer and a fall
Mm-hmm.
cohort. Others only start in the summer. So it's just it depends. It's
Yeah.
just one of the two words to remember, unfortunately, because
Yep,
it really
yep.
does.
And you probably, I mean, running this program that you were at, you probably knew what your peers had, that they had different programs they were running with different schedules and requirements for entry, right?
Right.
You've seen
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yep.
Yeah. And
Yep.
everybody is operating in a silo, and what they're doing makes sense for them, but from the student perspective, it's chaos.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. So, we're getting kind of towards the end here, but I do want to ask you, so what advice do you have for the student who maybe feels behind, because maybe they took a gap year, maybe they stopped out to go to Japan,
Right?
and now they're coming back, or they've tried a few different schools and they're just like, I just haven't found. So what would your advice be for those folks?
Yeah, it's never too late. There's no wrong path. There may be the path you see on TV. Maybe there's the path that you think all your friends are taking that appears on social media. But in reality, that's just one version of higher education. And
Hmm.
everybody does higher ed their own way. Everybody's on their own timeline and taking their own route. And there are actually not that many students who do a very traditional, 4 years. They're admitted, they know which major they want. They're going to stick with that major all the way through, graduate in 4 years, and call it a day. That's actually a little bit rare. It's more common to change your major, explore,
Hmm.
take a transfer, take a year off. There are so many ways, and none of them are wrong, right? If you're always taking the next right step for you, you're not doing anything wrong. And don't be afraid to pivot and change. If something's not working for you, make it different. I think I quote that in the book. I can't remember who said it, but there was a guy out there on YouTube. I think he sold Amway or something. It was not the best quote I ever came up with, but I love it. If something's not working for you, change it. You're not a
Hmm.
tree, you know? And
Yep.
I love that
Yep.
for the students. You're not a tree. You're not planted there. You can uproot yourself and go somewhere else to find a better fit. And you should.
Right.
This is your 4, 5, 10 years. Make it what you want it to be. Don't suffer through something that's not working for you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, before we get to the last question, I do want to highlight, we brought up your website, and I do want to show the people who are watching this on YouTube. So here we go. Here it is, your Transfer Savvy website. And so you can get your book
Yes.
here from the site. And I do hopefully, recommend that, ultimate or the complete guide to college transfer. But
Yeah.
down here, you do provide, these are those resources that you have
Yes.
that connect with the chapters from each of the books. So anybody can go on here
Yeah. Anybody
and
can go
get
on.
this information, and I
Yeah.
think it's super helpful. And to your point, I think all of the things on here, even if you're a first year, it makes sense
Yeah.
to have in this information. Financial aid, comparing colleges, sample financial aid appeal letters and templates. I think that is excellent and can be used by many different types of students and
Yeah. Yeah.
college students. So
I'm
yes, so I want to
especially
make
a
sure we
fan
highlight that.
of yeah, there's the GPA calculator and quarter semester converter in chapter
Right
4.
here.
That's
Yep.
probably my favorite resource, because strangely enough, the most popular blog post on that site is the one where I explain quarters and semesters. And I didn't
Oh yeah.
realize
That is
How few
helpful.
people understand it. They don't really know what the difference is. And then if you get a credit report and you get like 2.67 credits for something, you're like, why am I getting,
Right.
so I decided that a self-calculating spreadsheet would be really useful. So I put that in there so you can just load up your courses and it will calculate your GPA, your credits, your, quarter to semester conversions, all those things. That's probably my favorite that I want to highlight. Go use it, people. I had to pay an Excel spreadsheet guru to do it for
Oh,
me, so
did
please go
you?
use it.
There you go.
I'm
There
not
you
good
go.
enough at Excel. I was like, I know it can do this.
Right.
I don't know how to make it work. Please do it for me.
Well, there you go. Now people can just go onto your website and you've already taken care of the work for them.
Yep.
So, awesome. Well, great. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up, Jamie. I always ask my guests the same final question, and that is, what is one piece of advice that you received from a mentor, a friend, a colleague, a family member, that you'd like to share with others?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's that you have to find something you enjoy in college. Trying to pick a major that's going to lead to a job, a career, it's a fool's errand. You can't predict what the
Mm,
economy is going to be 10, 20 years from now. You have to pick something that you like well enough to do for 4 years and excel at and build relationships with professors, hence linguistics. Somebody told me this early on when I was agonizing. I was like, what should I do? I think I'm going to be pre-law so I can become a lawyer. And somebody said to me, you got to find something that you love, because it's a long 4 years and then it's a
right.
long life of a career. So you have to find something that you really want to do. And sometimes that means taking a leap of faith. Linguistics was
Mhm.
definitely a leap of faith, but it has turned out okay.
Absolutely. I'd say more than okay.
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, good. Thanks for that. Thanks. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up today's session. I'd like to thank Jamie for joining me today, and thank you to all of you for listening to today's edition of College Bound Success, College to Career. If you found today's episode helpful, please be sure to follow and rate and share it with someone who's navigating their own college journey. For more tips, tools, and support, you can visit my website at nostalskicoaching.com. We'll make sure that that is also in the show notes. And please follow me on LinkedIn. And until next time, stay curious, stay confident, and stay boundless. Thanks, everybody.